Instructors spend countless hours designing courses, delivering lectures, and facilitating active learning. Yet, because of the sheer volume of grading, all of that effort usually boils down to a single, unexplained letter grade on a final exam. To manage this bottleneck and attempt to grade fairly at scale, higher education relies heavily on standard assessment rubrics. These grids are intended to offer an objective, standardized measure of student performance. Look at this cited rubric by Biggs and Tang. A B grade requires points drawn from mainstream literature while using appropriate structure. Notice this takes two entirely distinct skills, factual recall and structural logic, and merges them into a single requirement. So how exactly does an evaluator score the asymmetrical student? Consider a student who crafts a brilliant, highly convincing structural argument but completely forgets to cite the mainstream literature. Or a student who quotes the reading perfectly but writes an incoherent essay. Because their skills do not neatly fit the blended descriptor, the rubric breaks down. The instructor is forced to abandon the objective standard they set out to use, reverting to guessing the grade based entirely on gut instinct. When an evaluator is forced to compromise and guess at a final grade, the data generated by the exam becomes corrupted. Extracting any specific metric about where the student actually succeeded or failed is now statistically impossible. If a student receives that B grade descriptor, but it only accurately describes half of what they wrote on the page, they cannot use that feedback. It offers them no actionable direction for how to improve. To fix this, we have to dismantle these confounded rubrics entirely. The solution is to decouple assessment criteria into strictly non-overlapping, orthogonal skill sets. By separating these variables, grading ceases to be a holistic approximation. It becomes a quantifiable selection process, where every single skill is measured independently. The summative exam re-enters the learning arena as a tool that provides the specific, actionable data needed to guide the student's next steps. To eliminate gut instinct from the assessment process, we need to build a new framework from the ground up. That starts with defining distinct, non-overlapping competencies. This table isolates academic skills with separate definitions, ranging from encyclopedic recall to empirical data collection. Notice how analytical application of theory is completely severed from communicative clarity. A student can now be graded accurately if they have excellent logic but poor grammar. For the system to remain transparent and manageable, an instructor should select a maximum of 3 to 4 of these distinct competencies to evaluate on any given exam. Each selected competency is then assigned a hard point cap. This assigns a strict mathematical weight to how much that specific skill impacts the total final grade. To handle open-ended assignments, where students might take different approaches, the matrix relies on the 150 to 200% rule. If the analytical category is capped at 10 points, the individual attributes inside that category should sum up to a total of 18 or 20 potential points. By offering an excess of potential points, the matrix does not force students to conform to a single rigid answer key. They can hit the maximum score through multiple, personalized pathways of academic excellence. Once the broad competencies are defined, we zoom in. Each competency is broken down into highly granular attributes of student performance. This matrix evaluates attributes across a 4-level spectrum. The highest tier yields full points for outstanding performance, while the second yields a half score for a laudable attempt. The bottom 2 tiers yield no score, offering mild critique or direct criticism of outright mistakes. Every descriptor in this matrix is engineered with a dual purpose. First, it identifies the student's past performance, so they clearly recognize their own work. Second, it explicitly directs their future learning by telling them how to correct their habits. The 0-score tiers allow the instructor to capture vital, formative feedback. The student receives rigorous, constructive critique, but they are not penalized with negative points for attempting a difficult concept and failing. With the matrix built, the workflow for the evaluator completely changes. Faced with a massive stack of exams, there is no more deliberating over a final letter grade. The evaluator's task is to objectively select predefined sentences mapping to the student's performance. Evaluators can even add zero-point mild critiques to otherwise blank columns, giving the student specific advice on where to focus future efforts without impacting their score. However, there is a strict rule in the opposite direction. Evaluators must never select an unearned positive comment to artificially inflate a weak performance, as every positive comment directly carries points toward the final grade. Because every single point awarded is inextricably tied to a standardized, clearly written verbal description that the student will read, the resulting assessment is inherently fair. By restricting the instructor to a click-based selection process, subjectivity is removed from the equation. The expert is forced to map their evaluation against explicitly predefined standards, rather than their own fatigue or bias. This level of detail sounds impossible to maintain under the crushing reality of large enrollment university courses, but the matrix is designed to scale. Executing this specific matrix in a spreadsheet enables the direct automation of the evaluator's data selections. The spreadsheet splits the data into two paths. First, the quantitative route. Positive scores feed into a sum formula to instantly generate the final grade. Second, the qualitative route. Selected descriptive text blocks route through a standard mail merge. The final output of this automated routing is a highly personalized, multi-page feedback document, instantly generated and formatted for every individual student. By leveraging spreadsheet automation, a single instructor in a 200-person introductory course can deliver individualized, actionable feedback that was previously impossible at that scale. Beyond the immediate benefit to the student, this system produces macro-level data that dictates the long-term design of the course. Because the criteria are strictly orthogonal, the aggregate data generated by this rubric system acts as a precise diagnostic tool to identify exact class-wide deficits. An instructor no longer has to guess that a cohort has poor analytical skills. The data will show exactly whether the class failed at applying logic, or if they simply lacked the vocabulary to use scientific terms correctly. Armed with this specific aggregate data, faculty can precisely target active learning components for the following semester to address the exact skills their students lack. And because the instructor is required to specify exactly what constitutes good student performance before the exam is ever written, the entire curriculum is forced to strictly align with its stated learning outcomes. The traditional final exam no longer needs to function as a terminal, useless black box for either the student or the instructor. By combining orthogonal assessment criteria with automated data workflows, we finally realize true constructive alignment, establishing the summative exam as a vital, active learning arena.